Hello and welcome everybody to today's Criterion Learning or Criterion webinar about our R2 release. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Got a nice little presentation for you today to talk about all of our exciting things that are happening with Criterion that it's upcoming and will soon be available for you. So let me get this up here. All right, so the very first thing we want to talk about is the timeline of our release schedule right here. And here you can see what that timeline is. So we have our webinar today. Obviously, you're here now. And so today, the 18th, we're having our webinar. The release date for 25R2 is Monday, July 28th. Now, I will say that is subject to change. We hope that doesn't happen, but it is subject to change. We'll make any announcement about changes if they do happen. All right, and I do want to mention our Criterion Go app, which is available on Android and iOS, and so it's available for you to use and use for self-service on the go as you need to. So you can go out there and do whatever you need to do as far as your employee record, as well as many other things. We're going to talk about some great enhancements to that today. So without further ado, let me go ahead and switch over to my browser here, and I'd be happy to share you 25R2. And we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to cover. I apologize for all the different colors in here, but we're going to kind of go to high level and I'll go into the details here. So we're going to start off talking about the talent module. That includes the performance module, which is like journals and performance reviews and succession planning. And then we're going to go down and we'll talk about some changes in HR as well as payroll, some things in the system that are general to the system scheduling, which we made some fantastic improvements last release, and we're making some more fantastic improvements this release. Of course, I don't want to sell recruiting short. And then there is a lot in Criterion Go, which I just showed you the QR codes. So we're going to talk about a lot of those things that are available over there. So let's go ahead and get started here. We'll talk about journal entries. So if you're not familiar with journal entries, they are basically employee notes that you can put on an employee. You're in self-service or in HR if you want to do it on the employee record over there. So I can go into my performance here and you'll see there's two things. My journals, now this is nothing new. We've made some great enhancements to it though. So my journals would show any journals that are shared with me and I can see those right here. But let's talk about actually creating a journal and the changes that make it visible to the employees. So this is a journal entry for a manager or a supervisor, those types of things. You need to put a note in about an employee. And so here you'll see the people that are reporting to me. I could choose somebody like this. And then what is the grouping for this here? So we have these different types of groups you may want to have out there for this. Let's just say teamwork has that. The title of the note. So project leader. All right. Maybe you want to include an attachment. This is one of the key changes here. So previously this was called private and it was unchecked by default, which we've changed based off of some feedback from our clients like yourselves. We've made some changes here. So by default now it is private and you need to check this box to share with your employees. And so you'll see this when you go in, if you already have existing journals, you'll see the change of the name when R2 is released here. It'll say share with employee, and it's going to be off by default. So that helps to make sure that you're keeping things that should be internal, maybe just at managers and HRs internal. And then if you do want to share it with the employee so they can see it over in the My Journals, you'll be able to share that with the employee. All right. And so maybe I do want to share this with the employee here, and I might say, Sean did a great job leading the projects, something like that. Now, you may notice a new button down here at the bottom, and that is to use AI to maybe help you with what you're going to say here. Sometimes you're not exactly sure how to get those words out in the right manner. So you can use AI down here to do that. So you might want to say, professional, provide some additional context and say, the alpha project was Sean's project, and he did a great job as the manager, something like that. Now, of course, AI is never perfect. So when we review this here, we want to make sure that we agree with what it says here. And you'll notice here's what I originally said is Sean did a great job. And then you'll notice down here what we've suggested as, the replacement for that. So you'll see right there. And I can either choose to go back to what my original was by discarding what was suggested, or if I want to replace that, I can replace that. And now that is right here. Okay. Additionally, what we've done is even if somebody doesn't use this, we're going to check to make sure that there's nothing that might be potentially concerning to HR. Sometimes managers might say something that is not necessarily the most HR friendly, to say the least. So when we click add journal entry here, you don't really see anything happen. But if I had something there that was, could potentially raise some red flags for HR, I would get a message popping up and it would tell me what the problem was. So if they said something, maybe they used some language that wasn't appropriate or something like that, I would see that. And I would be able to go back and I can edit that. Maybe I actually do then click the generate with Chai and have it help me out, have it clean it up a little bit. So we do check that in there. And then what happens is if they ignore that, maybe they say, I don't care, I'm really mad at Sean for what he did. It'll flag it in the other side over in HR that there was some potentially concerning language use. So that'll be available for you. When I go over here as an example, I'll be able to see that. Let me go to Sean's record. And I would do that. Now, I don't have a flag because everything was great, but I would have a flag if there was a problem. There would be a little indicator that there was a problem on that. And if I go to his journal entries here, right here would be where that flag is. And so a little red flag would show up. Now, you'll notice here, it does show the author and the last edit time. So this is also something that we've changed here. Now, I am Ted. So if I change it, you're not really going to see anything change in here. However, let's say his manager put something in and I did edit it for whatever reason. Again, maybe there was some language or I wanted to put in some additional context. I can edit this and then it would reflect that I changed it last and the last time that it was changed. So it would have the original author as well as anybody who's edited it. So that is a new enhancement there to kind of have that background. And there's also workflow that you can turn on for this if you would like to have workflow. So maybe HR or somebody else reviews that documentation. All right, so those are our changes into the journal. And I do want to mention, of course, as I did earlier, this came from you, from our audience of a request, a customer feature request on this. And we appreciate that. Obviously, we're adding this to the system. It may not happen immediately after you come into the system here and you do a request for a new feature, but we do listen to you and we add these features into the system. And you're going to see a lot of those today are going to be in here, and you may recognize ones that you've submitted in here. So if you're in the audience, you were the person who submitted this, you'll see the fruits of your labor there when you make that post. All right, I did want to mention one last thing here with journals, and that is a new report for journals available under performance reviews. You'll see journal entries here. And of course, I can run this for a date range and for a particular employee and stuff like that. So I might want to run it for everything this year. Maybe you're doing like performance reviews. You want to look at everything in the performance review period, something like that. I can choose the employee that is appropriate for. So Sean, and view his thing here. And of course, I'm doing it as a PDF, but I could drop this out to Excel and stuff like that. So there you go. You can see that journal entry report is available. All right, so that's our journal entry enhancements here, and we do thank you for those suggestions. Let's move on to a couple of things with performance reviews, and they are a multi-step sign-off workflow for performance reviews. So as you may be aware, you have an approval workflow for performance reviews. Sometimes you want the employees involved in that. So the subject of that performance review might need to verify or approve that review. Sometimes they disagree with it and they will not accept the review. And we can tell the system, you know what, let's send it to them anyways. If they approve it or if they don't, we're still going to go forward with it. We'll take their notes, so they can put in some notes if you need to, but we're going to let it go ahead and be approved anyways. So I'll show you how that has worked here. And I have this one I've created called performance review with EE or employee review. And so this start up here hasn't changed. Nothing's changed up at the top, but there's some new steps down here or not new steps, but new performers that you can have down here. So of course, the initiator, that might be the manager who submits their review. And then, of course, the manager level 1 of verification. But I did want to point out that you can have in here other performers. You'll notice here, assigned employee. That's going to be the subject of the review, the employee who was reviewed. And so I can include them here, maybe as a verifier, or maybe they're approver, like I have assigned right here. So you'll see the assigned employee, and then this new checkbox shows allow workflow to proceed if rejected. So if they're the final approver, it's going to still approve it, even if they reject it. So lets them be mad at you, but still approve it. And of course, if they were like the verifier or something like that, the same idea would apply there. So you would attach this to your performance review, and then when it goes through, the employee can say their piece, but still you can have that approval there. Okay, we've done also some changes in the goals for employees. And so let me go ahead and show you that on an employee. I'll just pick somebody here where we might want to have some goals for them. So of course, if you're not exactly sure where goals are, they are under performance, but I do always want to remind people that you can use the search bar to find that too. All right, so let's look at goals. Now, one thing you may notice here is I don't require the review if I don't want to have the review. So I can say I don't want it tied to review. Of course, I could say I do want it tied to review, but I don't have to have that tied to review. Let me just make sure I have a workflow in place. So I could say, this is the mid-year goal, and Alfred will submit his reports on time every time as his goal. Now, I can, of course, attach it to review. The reason I don't see your review here now is because I don't have one for him. He's not in a review period. But if I did, I can select that for him there. I, of course, can set a due date. Maybe it's going to be the end of the year, something like that. And then the weight here is optional. I don't have to have a weight on here. So, if you're doing one that's not attached to a review, maybe it doesn't make sense to have any weighting to it, because you're not like having 3 goals in one review and you need to weight them. So it's just going to be outstanding on its own. So it's not tied to a particular review, or of course I can tie it to review. All right, so that's a new option out there to do that. And then also, if I don't want to show future goals on the review, which is something we added, I don't know, maybe a year or 2 ago, I'm trying to remember, is I can go into my review periods here and I can tell it that I don't want it to have future goals. So I can tell it to exclude those goals. You'll see here, show future goals. So by default, we are not showing them. And then what you would do is if you want to show those future goals on there, you can do that. So when I go into my goals, whoever's on this this review, you may remember at the bottom, there was a section that allowed you to put future goals. Now you can exclude that. If you just uncheck this, or not check it, I should say, it will not show that. All right, so that's a way to hide those goals if you don't want to do that. All right, so that's something that, again, came from a recommendation from our clients. They don't want to show that because maybe they set the goals during the year and not during that review time. So a couple of changes that I mentioned with performance reviews and goals. And let's talk about some changes to succession planning, and kind of related to performance and potential for your employees. And that is some new tools for succession planning for admins and managers. So let me go back out here, and I'll close this out here. And I'm going to go to my employees, and I want to look at what we call team succession planning. So previously, succession planning is available to admins, and you can kind of look at it from a position. You've got your CFO, and here is the succession plan for your CFO, and here are all those folks that you have on your radar to possibly replace them if they leave. Now we can involve managers in that if you like. So of course, there is security behind this. You don't have to enable this, but I can go into succession planning. Here's a list of my employees, and there's 2 things here. One is I can go to somebody and I can add them into the succession plan of a position that is configured that way. So you'll see here, I don't have any configured. I don't recall what his job title is, but if he was possibly in the succession planning for CFO, I'd be able to add him to that. I wouldn't require an admin to do it. And I do want to talk about that just real quickly on how succession planning is set up. We are actually going to have I believe we're having a webinar on it. We've had one recently on this, but when I do that, let's do like CFO. These are where I can say, here are the positions. So if I find somebody who's accounting supervisor or accounts receivable, I can then add them into the succession planning. I think Chris was an assistant coach. So let me just add that into the succession plan just so you can see how that would work for him. All right. And anybody who's in these positions can be added. Doesn't mean they are automatically added. Let me go ahead and refresh here. I should have done this ahead of time. I forgot that he was not in that succession plan for CFO, probably because we wouldn't have normally a coach go to CFO, but who knows? So now I should be able to, hopefully, I'm not sure, but I can add him to the succession plan here, and then I can do this. So that would allow me to go around, not around, but allow me to see what's out there first off. If I added him to the succession plan here as a admin user, I can go into my talent pools for CFO and add him, and I would be able to see that over there. But I also can add him into here. Let me see if I see these guys. That'd probably be a better demo on that one. Okay, looking at those names there. Let's just see if they report to him here. I don't see one of them. Let me look one more time. Elise, Heather, David. And I don't see them, unfortunately. So I apologize not being able to demo, but these are the that where I can add them into that succession plan. But the other key thing I want to show you, of course, is these two drop-down menus up here at the top. Now, these are where you can put the performance and potential for your employees. This isn't tied to the performance review currently. So maybe somebody has a suggestion for that and you want to see how that might work there. We can certainly consider that. But right now, what we're doing is we're just going to say, all right, go ahead and give us your thoughts on this employee. Are they a good performer, high performer, poor performer? What's their performance like? What do you consider the potential to be? And HR can also do this here. They can go on the HR side and the admin. I can go to Alfred or whoever and put them as, high potential, medium potential, whatever it is, and save that on here. All right. And you'll notice it's going to update here. And let me just do a one other person. I'll do good performance, high potential. And hopefully you kind of see what this is going through. I can have an approval process on it, but if you're familiar with a 9-box grid, this is going to populate a 9-box grid. So I'll just do one more here, good performance, medium potential, and you'll see that. And of course, I could go through everybody and put that in there. And this is something that the HR person can also do. I can go to an employee, put them on the 9-box grid. Now, we're talking about 9-box grid. That is right here, team 9-box grid. So this allows me to see where those folks are in my team on the 9-box grid. I can narrow it down to like a certain department I'm in part of, or location, position, even employee groups if I want to do that. You'll see here, maybe I don't want to see the employees' names, so I could turn that off there. But let me hit show the grid, and here we go. Here's Amos, here's Andre, there's Alfred, those people that I've updated, and here they are on the grid. Now, if we have too many people, let's say there's a bunch of good performers, high potential, maybe there's 20 of them. There's going to show 20, and you can then click on it to see those people. If I want to go and change something, maybe I've reconsidered Andre here, and I think, you know what, he's not just good performance, he is high performance, and I want to move him around. I can save that change right there, and then I can refresh the grid, and here he is moved over. So this allows you to view that 9-box grid here. Now, of course, these are the people that report to me and the people that actually have values. That you'll see just the 3. I've got, I don't know what it was, about 20 or so employees have reported to me. I'd have to classify them in there to do that. And of course, there is a version I can view over here when I'm looking at my employees if I want to see a 9-box grid over there. So I can go in, let's just update a person here. Here's succession planning on the admin side, and I can update that. All right, now I don't remember if he reports back to Ted, but if he did, Ted would be able to see that change out there. And now there's also a report available right here called 9-box grid, where I can run it here, but this is now potentially the entire company. But again, I could break it down if I want to. And then I'll show the grid. All right, so you can see how quickly and easily that runs and shows the employees where they are on there. All right, so let's go back out to self-service. We've talked about our talent module, part of our talent module. I didn't talk about recruiting yet, but our talent module and a number of changes in there in journals and performance reviews and succession planning. We're going to go ahead and throw up a quick poll before we move on to the HR module. And while we're asking you these questions, I do want to, remind you that we do have I believe we have a Q&A open, as well as a chat if you want to ask any questions on these things. And if you do have questions, we can follow up with you if we're not able to answer them today. Just a few more seconds here. Thank you for your replies so far. All right, thank you for that. So let's move on to talk about some HR things. You'll see open enrollment and benefits changes, some changes in the LOA, smart time off accruals based on hours worked, and time off accruals now support project-based rules. So let's talk about open enrollment coverage. So I've gone ahead and started an open enrollment for my employee here so you can see what we're talking about. And go ahead and do my open enrollment here. So this open enrollment, is for this month, and I'm in the middle of it here. I don't have a very complicated one, only 3 steps. Of course, as you may know, open enrollment, you can have as many steps as you need to cover all your different plans. I'll go ahead and just step my way through this here. So here you'll see, my coverage, my cost and coverages now for this. Now, there's nothing new here as far as the coverage isn't showing, because this is a medical plan. There is no coverage per se, as far as like they're not getting a life insurance $100,000. Now, maybe they are. It would show on this screen. You'll see that right here. But you'll see the premium on there, and as well as the employee and employer contribution. This plan is no cost to the employee, so they get 0 there. All right, and then here you'll see the dental plan and what they've selected over there. All right, notice that premium number there, and then you'll see here the coverage. So that's new. It was not here previously, but it's now here to help clarify that stuff. Now, this is one where I've typed in the amount, but sometimes you might have like a multiplier or something else where it's calculated for the employee. And so we want to be able to show that to them. So that's what we've added in here. All right, so that's great. And then if I move on to the next screen, you'll see the summary has that as well. So as I mentioned, like with the medical, there is no coverage. There's the premium. And then there is a coverage amount for, let me get past this form here. There's a coverage amount somewhere. Where did I skip past it? Where's my life insurance? Oh, I skipped. Life insurance is right here. There's the form. So there's the coverage for the life insurance. All right, so giving you a great idea of what that looks like out there for the open enrollment and showing the coverage for that. All right, so that's the employee coverage, dependent coverage, and premium values across open enrollment, and you can see those clearly, and that way the employees can know exactly what's happening with that. All right, now we know reality hits you sometimes, and people need to go through multiple enrollments, maybe even within the same year. Perhaps somebody went through, you can go through one enrollment at a time. So, let's say they get married and they have a child. We need to make them finish one before the next one. So you'll only be able to do one at a time for these. I can't really show that because I only have one here. But if he did have a life event like marriage and then also a birth of a child that were, very close to each other, he would have to finish the marriage one or whichever one was submitted first before he can do the other one. So that way we make sure that we're not having conflicting records updating, like he's got his spouse on one because he's doing the marriage one, and he's only got his children on the other one because he's doing the birth of a child. We make you finish one and then you go to the other one. So that way it's a complete record of that. All right, like I said, it's difficult to show, but very powerful and makes it easier for the employees to make sure that things don't get messed up. So that's the flexible open enrollment option out there. The coverage rules for for benefits. So let's talk about that real quick. So yeah. When you are setting up your plans, you can link things together, not just saying, are they enrolled in a plan, but also looking at the coverage of a plan. And again, this is something that is not really visible in self-service because it's set up behind the scenes. You don't want the employees to have to make decisions of stuff that they don't know what their eligibility is and stuff. You want to show them what's appropriate to them. So when you're setting up, for an example, an HSA plan, you might need to look at their age and show the appropriate options for them. Or uh, you're going to show the spouse insurance, but it's a percentage of the employee insurance. They get 50% of the amount of coverage the employee has selected. So now we support, when you go into here, some additional things in the formulas to allow you to show employees the right thing. So not just are they enrolled like I have here, but also what coverage do they have in that other plan? So do they have family coverage? So the HSA family is available. Do they have, have they selected 200,000 in employee life insurance so they can only go up to $100,000 in spouse life insurance? Again, this is one of those things that is formula based, and I want to try to keep it high level because I only have another 30 minutes. But that we now do that. If you do need some help on that, of course, there's a number of ways to get help. I will always mention our help here, but please reach out either to your implementation team or to support if you need some help on doing that. You'll see if I go down, we talk about our formulas in here, and it'll mention those things in here. So here's some examples of these, the eligibility, et cetera. Our formulas in the help here will tell you exactly how that works. And I encourage you to read on this if you are interested in this. If you get your hands into the setup of the plans and the formulas and everything, read up on this in here. We do have some information in the release notes, but the idea is to make it so that it is more foolproof. Employees can't select things that they are not eligible for or something like that because they've selected something in another plan. So that's our smarter benefit coverage rules that I mentioned right here. All right, LOA reasons and notes. This is a simple one. Again, this is one of our CFRs that came in, a customer feature request. So I believe I have somebody on a leave here somewhere. I thought I did. Let me just see. There we go. So here's Lynn. She's currently out on a leave. But the reason I want to show this is when I go to the leave of absence screen, we've exposed some more information out here. All right, so you'll see now the reason notes and the reason are here. So you can see this at a high level. You don't have to dig into the plan. You can just quickly see that information there. Very simple little ad there. And like I said, this came as a customer feature request. Somebody needed to see that information quickly just to save a few seconds, and obviously those add up over time. So we do want to appreciate you and thank you for suggesting that. Of course, what it's reading, just to show you, is the reason right there. Okay, so that is the LOA reason fields on there. Let's talk about here. Smarter time off accruals and time off accruals now support project-based hours. So this is, again, very formula driven. I will set the table there on this stuff, but allows you to use complex tokens and formulas in here when you're doing time off plans, as well as accrue hours based off time on a project. And I'll go in and I'll just pick a sick leave plan to talk about this. So it's going to be down in the accrual area where you have your formula. Mine, of course, is very simple, 8 hours. But let's talk about some of those new things that are here. And this is actually in the help. I was reading it yesterday. And so we can talk about how this works here. All right, so you'll see as I go down, we're giving some examples in here of these. Let me go down. Oh, I could have sworn I saw it yesterday. Maybe, you know what, I went to the help center and saw it. But the idea is that if you need to grant time off to people who are working on specific projects, maybe, you've got 20 projects and they have different accrual rules because of different union or collective bargaining agreements, and that you need to calculate based off of the project, you can now reference the project when you're looking at the hours, not just hours for the period, but hours at project A versus project B and different accruals for that. So that is something you can now include in your time off accruals if you ever need to do that. So, not just things like their status and stuff like that, but the project is included. I don't recall which client needed that, but we do thank you for that suggestion of getting that in there. And the other one, of course, is more options for the accruals for time off on the hours worked, not just the project based, but also other calculations out there if you need to um, award it for actual hours worked, for part-time staff. So maybe they need to meet a certain threshold for working. So you're not giving like 1 hour for every 10 worked. They have to reach a minimum number of hours. They have to reach 30 hours in the week or 80 hours in the month or something like that. It'll then give them a lump sum of time. So once you reach 30 hours, now you get your accrual of 2 hours of vacation, as an example, or you reach 80 hours, you get 4 hours of vacation. So it's a rule that you can put in here in your accrual formulas. Again, it's one of these things that's not a visual, but something that's great out there for those two things. So as I mentioned, these all came mostly, I want to say all of them came from our CFR team, or so we do want to thank you for that. And we want to put up a poll here for the HR changes, the HR module changes. So that should be popping up here before we move on to payroll. All right, great. Thank you so much for that. So let's talk about some things with timesheet creation out here. And we have two things. One is previously an employee was able to go into a timesheet that was horizontal and copy from a prior period. So whatever that was set up on their horizontal timesheet, maybe they have 7 different projects and 18 different tasks, and copy that from one period to the next. We've expanded that out so that a manager can do that for the employees that they are managing. So if I've got 7 employees and I have a large variety of projects and tasks that I need to copy from one week to the next, you can do that now for a group of employees. Also, we have a task now to create timesheets. So the manager doesn't even have to remember to do that. So when I go over to my task scheduler here, I'll show you how this can be configured if you do need to do that. Of course, there's a large variety of task schedulers like reminders that can go out and things like that. But you might want to weekly on Sunday at 1 a.m. create your timesheet. So I'm going to do that here. Create timesheet soups. All right, and then you'll find a new system task out here called timesheet create. So when you do this, you select the timesheet layout you're going to create. As you can see, I have quite a few of them. But let's say I was just going to do it for this one right here. Of course, I can select multiple. And that's really all I need to do. What it's going to do now is every Sunday at 1 a.m. it's going to create timesheets. Now, as I mentioned, there's the option to copy on there. So if I do this, what I can do is go into my timesheet layout. I apologize. Let me go back in there because I didn't turn it on. Got to remember to check that flag called active there. And my horizontal timesheet is called, I forget the name because I want to make sure I go to the right one. Horizontal, super easy to remember, of course. So when I go into my timesheet layout for that horizontal timesheet, I do have an option here to automatically copy the prior timesheet. So this is great. Now, what it's not doing is it is not copying the hours. It is copying the configuration, the project, the task, and those other things.
Hi everyone. It looks like Steve is having some internet connection issues. We are working to get him back right now. Thank you.
I apologize about that. My connection got lost from my VPN connection. Caused problems. I apologize about that. I turned off my VPN and I can't connect right back in. Anyways, let me show my screen. I was surprised by that there. All right, so this is available for automatic timesheets. I'm not sure if that got cut off or not when it dropped, but this is only available for the horizontal timesheets because that's where you do set that stuff and you want to set it from 1 week to the next. It's not available for the verticals. And tasks and things like that. So horizontal only, that's what that allows you to do right there. All right, so that is the automated timesheet creation and the auto copy. Now, this last one is where you can configure different work locations to handle taxation in different ways. And let me explain what that means. Perhaps you have somebody who lives and works at your headquarters in Texas, but the project that they are billing all of their time to and everything is in Utah. And you want to make sure that they're not charged any Utah taxes because they are not going on site and doing the work there. They are staying in Texas and doing the work in Texas. So you can tell the system to use the person's headquarters or home office to record their taxes, and they're not going to get charged the taxes in that other state or other jurisdiction. Perhaps there's even a local. You're in Pennsylvania and you're going to be here and you don't need to pay the local taxes for the place across the state where you're not actually doing that work. So when you're setting up your work locations, it'll be a work location type. So give this to open up. The work location types would be here. And there's going to be different codes that you're going to use for this. So WFH is one we do now. So that, well, I shouldn't say do now. We've been doing that one for a long time where you can say, use the person's home address for things like, you know, their time zone and their taxability, you know, because they reside in one place and, you know, maybe not charging the projects, but you need to make sure they're paying their taxes in that locality. This is more when you start charging for locations and stuff like that when you are doing projects and tasks and everything. So you can have different work locations here. I forget the exact code. Maybe our team can let me know real quick. I believe it's WFO for work from office, but that'll be documented in here. And let me just look it up here very quickly. Okay, there's office, field, and remote. So WFO is work from office and WFH already exists as work from home. So it's the code that matters. The description doesn't matter. You could just call it headquarters or office or something like that. But the idea is that they are working from the office and then they're not charged their taxes where they actually are. All right. If they are, of course, going to a certain location, they're going to choose that location and the job and project and all those other things that are related, and the taxation will work there. So again, these are a lot of these things that we're showing are more conceptual in that you don't really see them as far as an employee is concerned. And that's kind of the whole point. You don't want to have the employee go through a bunch of hoops to do this. So we handle that for you with the work location. All right, so that is that there. I believe we have a poll for payroll. There we go. Thank you so much for that. And again, I want to apologize for that momentary disconnect. I did I hopefully solved that by getting off our VPN. That's what happens when I am working from home and not the office. Okay, so thank you for that there. Let's talk about a couple of system things here. And one of them is for your employee groups, you might need to look at the employee's work location, and not just the work location, but the state code for the work location. Because you might have several projects in Texas or Utah or California or wherever they happen to be. So when you're setting up your groups, you can now reference the state of the work location. In fact, let me just go in here and talk about that real quick. If you do have the address, of course, we require the address to be here for us to work. If you don't fill in the address or at least the state, we're not going to be able to know, even though I say CT like Connecticut, I don't know it's in Connecticut unless it's down here and I say Connecticut. All right. Now, when I go to my employee groups, I can now use that as a dynamic token in here. So I can say TT employees. Hopefully I have some there. And you'll notice here, let me show you the formula. I'll put it in here real quick. Just copy and paste this. As work location state and then the state code. So I would do CT as an example. Of course, you need to know what the state code is for this to work. And I can save this. Now I can add other things, and their job title is this and their department is that, and those types of things if I need to. All right. And so this is for any work location. So if they have several work locations assigned and Connecticut happens to be one of them, it'll pull them into this group. If you do want to do the primary work location being Connecticut, it's this one. As primary work location state, and then Connecticut as an example. All right, so that's the difference. There is a primary, and then there is just any one. And now I have 111 people in Connecticut. Maybe everybody's primary, but maybe it's a subset. If they did have as a secondary or whatever, they would show up if I did that other formula. All right, so that's a new token that's available for dynamic employee groups. All right, so it could be very useful when you're making your employee groups to find out who's working in your various states. All right, now web forms. We continue to make improvements in our web forms. So let's talk about what we've made here, which is the ability to select multiple items at once when you are editing a form. So you can move multiple things if you need to. Instead of just clicking and moving one field and moving the next field, I can now select several fields if I need to and move them all. So not like very, detailed here. I don't need to spend 10 minutes on it, but very useful if you do need to do something on here. And you'll see here, I also can line things up. If I want everything to be aligned in a certain horizontal or vertical, I can do that right there. And I can make them all required, all locked, and things like that. So it allows you to multiple edit fields on here if you need to. And, of course, I could do it for not just data fields, but other fields as well. So if I need to make them bigger and that type of stuff, I can go ahead and handle this. So this will be great if you need to make sure everything is lined up perfectly. I know I've gone through this before where I've gone into each field and I've looked at the coordinates to make sure everything is lined up. Now I could just select, all of my fields and say, yeah, let's just go ahead and line them all up there. And it's great. So I want to thank our team for somebody who makes forms for doing this. I don't remember who this suggested it, but it was such a great suggestion and makes our lives easier. If you're designing forms, it's going to make your life much, much easier. All right, so like I mentioned, a couple of different things here in the system, the tokens for the work location, and then the alignment and editing of your web form elements. So I believe we have a poll for this, if I'm not mistaken. I do see there's a question out there. I know we've got some panelists here. Maybe they can answer that question or take it back and reach out to that person. All right, a couple more to go before I get to switch to our Criterion Go, but I do not want to undersell the scheduling and recruiting things that we have out here. So thank you for those poll results there. So scheduling, as you may recall, we've made a number of changes in scheduling over the last quarter. Last quarterly update, we had a large number of changes, and we're continuing that here. So one is a graphical shift assignment view by employee. Now, we had it previously. We added it for shift. Now we're expanding that to the employee. What does that mean? So we're going to go in here and I'll show you the shift assignment. I'll make one for this week so you can kind of see what it looks like here. I'll just go ahead and do that for, actually, it looks like I do have one for this week. Yes, I do. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do this here. Now I can easily go through what we would call our older view. And I can say, yeah, I want to assign Ted and, or whoever it is, I need to assign his first name is Ted, not last name. Let's go ahead and assign Ted in the morning and Chris in the afternoon. So very simple for me to do this here in this view. But the other view is great too, what we call our shift assignment view, which is the shift group here. And now I can shift over to an employee view. So this allows me to add here, and I can add individually on days, or I can add, again, using that same search, an employee here. If I want to see this by an employee, I can shift this around to what we call our view by employee. So let me show you what that looks like here after I schedule Chris and Ted. And I'm doing that because I'm going to show you the other thing in scheduling, which is shift swapping. So here you'll see my schedule for this week. If I want to view it by employee, rather than it being the group, now I see each employee is here. All right. It's very, very easy now to view this. If you have several employees, of course, makes it super easy to see that. And of course, I can click in here and do what I need to do for that particular assignment. All right, here I don't have anything for this week. What I'm gonna do is just copy from last week. And this will add Chris and Ted in here for next week. And of course, I can go forward into several weeks into the future if I need to and shift back and forth to this view. So like I said, very easy view. The default view is this shift group view, and then just click the button to view it by employee. All right, so that is the shift view by employee. All right, and here you can see I've got everything out there for the next couple of weeks. So let's talk about shift swapping. Now, for shift swapping, this allows the employees to kind of work together to talk about, I need somebody to cover me tomorrow or next week on Friday morning, and I'll cover your afternoon shift or something like that. So first thing you need to do is to actually configure that, allow that to happen. And that means you need to set up your workflow. So, but to set it up on the shift, you go here, and I'll show you the workflow setup as well. So there's a checkbox right here. There's allow shift swapping. Here you can say how many days in advance. Maybe you always want to have at least 2 days in advance so that the manager has time to approve it or just verify everything looks good. So you can set the number of days in advance. If I do 0, they could shift swap today. As long as their shift hasn't started, they could shift swap today. And then this is the workflow that you can configure. And a workflow, we've seen workflows earlier. I was talking about the one for performance reviews, but let me show you the one for shift swapping that I have out here, just so you can kind of see how you might have this work here. So the initiator would be the person who's starting the shift swap, the other person, the assigned employee, and then a manager or whatever your status is. Maybe you've got several. All right. So you do need to configure that first before you can add the shift swapping to the shift itself. But what does it look like here in self-service? So let's go to my schedule out here. And I'm refreshing because I just scheduled myself. And here I can see my schedule for this week. Now, I cannot do this one because I've already started work. I can't shift swap something. Of course, I can't go back and shift swap for Monday because it's already happened. And I can't do today because this shift is already started. Now, let's say it was 6 a.m. and I woke up with a headache and I wanted to shift swap with somebody. I could do that as long as I was allowed to do it the same day. That's that setting of restrictions. But now let's go ahead and just say, let's next Friday, I want to shift swap. So I click on the shift and there's a button right here to swap. All right, I can go out here. It's going to show me anybody who has available shifts to swap in that date frame. And I can select it. Now, it will only allow me to swap if somebody is required and there's no conflicts. So I can't swap with somebody who's scheduled at the same time as me, or if I need to have a certain certification and they don't have one, I'm not going to see them there. All right. So we do take that into play. You won't even see that person out there if they are not available to be swapped. And I believe I have, and now that I think about it, I had a little bit of a conflict there. So let me resolve that just so you can see what happens. I'm going to resolve that conflict very quickly. I think Chris's schedule actually overlaps by 30 minutes or an hour. So I'm just going to change this to 5, just so there's no overlap. But you can see why there is an overlap there. It's not going to allow that to happen. And that's so that they aren't swapping into something that they're already working or swapping into something that they can't work. All right, so let me refresh this one. And today, here we go, swapping. You should show up here. You know what? I may have a requirement, but whatever it is, what you do is you select the employee that you're going to swap with, and it is per shift. So I can't say I want to swap the entire week with somebody. If I needed to do multiple, I need to do it for each shift, and that allows you to have the manager, get some feel about what's happening here. If they try to do the whole week, You might have confusion about overtime and coverage and stuff like that. So each shift does require that. And then they, of course, can schedule out, whatever they like out there. Here we go. Let me just change it to a different day. All right. And I'll do this here. Now, we do have this info out here that the employee is still responsible to cover their shift if this doesn't get approved. Because what happens if nobody ever approves it? Well, nobody, we want to make sure that shift is still covered. So we do tell them that they need to, still take that into consideration before, they consider it swapped. Right now, they can't go and swap the same shift again. They have to, kind of wait for that. But what'll happen is the manager or whoever, the Chris in that situation, we get a notification that there was an approval, and he can then say, yes, I agree to that. So it does require the other person to agree. And then the manager or whoever else in your workflow would approve that. All right. So some greatest enhancements into scheduling, the graphical view of employees, and self-service changes. Go ahead and put up a poll here. There we go. Thank you. All right. And we'll move over to recruiting while we're taking that poll there. All right, great. Thank you so much. So while you were digging that poll, let's talk about some of those things here. So first off is an enhancement to the offer letter generation. And some of the things we're going to talk about real quick here. So the offer letter generation, you may be aware that you can send an offer letter to somebody through the system here. So this is right here. This can be done in two ways. One is you may have a template, a form that you've created that you mail merge in various fields like their name, the position that's open, the start date, the salary, et cetera. All those things you might have in an offer letter. And you can continue using that template that you have out there. All right. But now we have an enhancement to having it generated for you using our AI. So again, you're given some prompts for different fields that are going to be on this one here. So you might want to put down their pay rate and the start date and all those types of things that are out there. Let's say he's going to start on the 28th and the pay rate's going to be 50,000 annually, whatever it is. I'll go ahead and just put some things in here for this. And I'm going to generate with Chai. Now this new prompt is here. This allows you to set the tone. Maybe you want to be enthusiastic about that because it's a great job offer. And you can set it in different languages. Of course, if you had other languages, I only have English and Spanish configured, but I can do that. The template allows us to evaluate an existing offer letter that you have and maybe pull some things off of that. So our AI will pull some things off of that, the context off of that. You can provide additional context if you need to, and then generate. So this will go out, it's going to write an offer letter about that position out there using enthusiasm, as you saw that. So you can see right here how this is talking about and the various fields that it was pulling from that open position, the job title, the location, the pay rate, the acceptance review time frame, the start date, and all those other things that are out there. If I want to make some additional changes to this, I can edit it and make those additional changes with fonts. And maybe I want to, I don't know, write in my own language in here, I could do that. All right, so that is a great enhancement to the offer letter generation that's out there for our candidates if you want to do that. All right, now let me go back out to my list of candidates here. So this candidate source is now something that you can edit to change the source of the candidate and not just be the career site. If you want to, maybe you entered them in manually or imported them in, but you actually got the data from a job fair or something like that, and you wanted to put that out there as a source, you can now edit that source and change it to whatever you like. So this is a nice little enhancement to be able to change that. That way you can do analytics on that. What's our best source of candidates and those types of things. You can edit that source to be able to have clarity on where that actually came from. It may have come from the career site, but maybe you actually wanted to change that. All right, so that's possible there. And also, if you're using, let's say, Indeed, and it comes in from Indeed, it will show that it came from Indeed. So if you're using one of the job boards that it's published through over here. All right, I didn't publish from Indeed, but if I did and I got them from there, it would come in. All right, auto numbering for job requisitions. So you may notice there's a job requisition number here, kind of straightforward. If this was the last number, 11 happened to be my last requisition number, the next one I create, if I have it enabled, would be 12. And then 13 and 14, et cetera, from there. So that way you don't have to remember, somebody doesn't have to keep a spreadsheet or tell you what the number is. You can do that here. Now, I know sometimes we have companies that have sophisticated numbering sequences and it's not sequential. You can certainly override it if you need to do that. All right, additional search and filter options. So allows you to do that. I'm actually going to skip a couple of things here because I want to get down to Criterion Go, but let's just at a high level talk about that. So additional search options out there for your candidates. And this allows your hiring managers to quickly find and manage their job postings in a search when they're looking for their jobs. So when I'm back over here, I have additional options over here to look for that. I don't want to sell it short. We have some things around the hiring manager and the recruiter. So we do have 2 new security profiles that'll be added called recruiter and hiring manager, where you can indicate that that's what they are, that they are a recruiter, they are a hiring manager, and they can have different access up here. So that way you can control that. You can also mark a hiring manager as the primary hiring manager on a job if you need to have one with several hiring managers. Let's say here I've got 2. I can mark one of them as the primary. So that way when I'm doing approvals, I might need it to go to the primary hiring manager versus every hiring manager. So you'll be able to mark them that way. And of course I could change it as I need to. The first one added will be the primary, but then I can change that. But we do have that ability to say somebody is a hiring manager using the security profiles, or they're a recruiter using the security profiles if you need to do that. So those are some new things over there. I want to just kind of quickly go through those. You see there with security profiles designated with their primary. All right, and then filtering the candidates by hiring source. So again, if I want to look at the source, kind of referencing back to the candidate source here, if I want to look at everybody from Indeed or everybody from the job site, you can then filter by that if you need to. All right, let me go ahead and put up a poll there real quick, and I'm going to join on my phone so you'll be able to see some of the enhancements over here on our great app. So as I mentioned before, the Criterion Go app, in fact, while that poll is up, I want to switch back to that QR code in case you haven't downloaded the new app. I will mention our older app is going to be retired after the release is done. So right now it's on schedule for the early part of August to be retired, which means it won't work. You can't use it to do stuff. And so let me go ahead and share that QR code in case you don't have it. Just real quick, I'll put it up for just a few seconds while I'm bringing up my mobile app here. So for Android and iOS, of course, it's available so that you can do what you need to do as far as whatever you're using there. Let me go ahead and share my my phone here so you'll be able to see our app. Now, you may have already seen this, but let's talk about some of the great enhancements that are available in our mobile app. So here it is, if you're familiar with it, this is, of course, what it looks like in our mobile app. So I'm going to go down the list here very quickly. The full onboarding experience is available here. So the employee can go to here and they can go to onboarding and complete their onboarding if they have not done it. He's done it. He's done 26 items, but I can go through here and I can do those items I need to do and click on them, do my address change, do my demographics, whatever it is, I can go ahead and do that. All right. Education and skills management is now available. So under the career option out here, you'll see education and skills. Certifications was here previously. Education and skills are now available. So an employee can review and add education and skills right here in mobile. All right, so very simple on there. The survey experience is available for any surveys that you have. Unfortunately, I don't have any surveys here, but if I did have a survey, I could run that right here through mobile, and it'll take me through my survey, and I can do that right there. All right, we mentioned the copying timesheets for those folks who might need a copy from one week to the next. We've brought that over to the mobile app as well, so you can do that copy timesheets. A new security page is available out there. So here you can see the security page that contains a lot of useful information, two-factor authentication. Now, this is an option that possibly is going to be disabled depending on your particular company. This is something where you can force it and not allow it to be disabled. So this whole option here would not be something the employee could change. So don't worry about that. They can't get around it by going to the mobile app and getting around that there. But if you want to turn on biometric, your face or your fingerprint, that's possible right here. And of course, they can change their password. And then you'll notice my signature right here. So I can edit my signature, clear it out if I need to, or add a new one. Right. For people who might need the adaptive technology, action buttons now use descriptive text. So if you do have somebody with maybe low vision and they can't read these things, we now use those adaptive technologies that are available in Android and iOS so that they can see, or not see, but know what those descriptions are. It reads them off. So they can tap on something and it'll say onboarding or time off or whatever that particular one is. All right, company policies are available here. Now, why is this? I apologize. Sometimes it does this to me. Let me just switch back here very quickly. I know that sometimes when I go in the app on my phone on meetings, it does this. So I apologize. I need to just quit the app and go back in. All right. So as I mentioned, the action buttons using descriptive text, that's an important one for people who might have vision issues and stuff like that, where they need to have that, and we support that on both Android and iOS, so you don't have to worry about that. It helps you to help out those employees who might need that. Let me go back in. It's nothing with our app. It is my uh, phone sharing here, so our app works great. The company policies, if you do have any outstanding company policies, the employee can sign them here within the app. So you saw the signature on the security screen. They can sign their app or their things right here in the app if they need to, those company policies, so they can review those and do that right there. Under payroll, they can get to their bank accounts and be able to manage those bank account details. If they need to change banks and put that information in here, they can now do that. All right, the calendar view with dynamic space options. So when you're looking at things like the scheduling and stuff like that, you can choose how you want to view this. So an employee can see their schedule and choose how they want to view that in the system here. A big one, and I'm sorry I moved this to the end of the list here, but is push notifications. So all those notifications that you get via email, possibly text messaging, and in self-service can now be pushed over to the mobile app. So we're all familiar, I'm sure, with push notification, where it'll tell you something is happening. But this is great if there's a approval needed. The manager will get a notification, they tap on it, and it goes to that particular thing that they need to do. I'll show you where you enable that in the system here in a moment. And then you'll see here option to block time off requests for approved timesheets. This really isn't just in the mobile app, but for if you have the timesheets, you're using our timesheets, you can block time off requests for prior periods or a period that's already been approved. So they can't request time for a timesheet that's already been approved. It's not just in mobile, it's available in self-service as well. And then if you are using the expense reports, that is something, of course, that they can do through here, but they'll also be able to see if it was not only approved, but paid. So this flag will show paid. I apologize, I don't have any that are paid in my system, but you'll see where it says approved. So not only can they add it through here, they can check the status of this. They don't have to go back to self-service. All right, so that is all the things in mobile. I want to show the push notification setup, but I'm going to go ahead and throw the poll up there while I switch back over to my browser, and then we'll be done for the day. Because sometimes people don't know where our configuration is for notification layouts. I don't know if a poll went up or not. Was there a poll? I know I'm not running the poll, but did we lose my poll person? I apologize if we did. Oh, looks like we may not have a poll. Okay. Oh, there it is. So Criterion Go, like I said, this is our new app. This is what it's going to be used going forward, starting with this version, with this release. This is what you're going to need to use if you're using mobile. I think as you look at that, you'll see that it is much easier to use than the old one. It works very quickly, and I encourage you to download that so that you can, get that out to your folks to be able to use the mobile app. It supports much more than the older version did, and it is obviously a product that is continually growing. So notification layouts, this is where you can edit your notifications and turn them on. I want to mention that's where you can turn them on if you need to do that. But let's go to your notifications, and you'll see there's a new column over here called push. So by default, this is disabled. We did not turn it on automatically because we didn't want to surprise you with this. So you would need to go through and turn it on for the notifications that you want to be pushed. Now, maybe it's all the certification ones. You can turn them all on like that. If you don't want like this app sync one turned on, don't turn it on, something that. So I can go through, I can turn on, several at a time like this, or I can, individually check off the ones that I want. Very easy to do that. When you're done there, you just hit update, and then all of those notifications would then be enabled for anything you turned on here. All right, so this does need to be turned on before you'll start receiving your push notifications. If you're wondering why they're not showing up, make sure you come back over here under notifications in your settings to turn them on. Okay, I got through the entire list I had out here. As you can see, we also have a ton of minor changes that we didn't put in our list here, the behind the scenes things. There's a lot of things we clean up in the back end to make the system more efficient. And I do want to thank everybody who made suggestions or anything you see out here that was yours. We want to give you a little round of applause for submitting that request out there. Please keep those coming. That's how we get better. That's how we can serve you better, and to make sure the system is how you need to use it. So we encourage you to go that in your settings there to click on the help menu and submit those things. And I do want to give a shout out to our development team. All of our team, they do a fantastic job of adding all of these new features. You see, I've got, 30 or 40 new things that they've added. They work hard and they get these things done for us, and I do appreciate them very much. Last but not least, I do want to be a little selfish. I'm going to talk about the learning webinars that we do and the upcoming schedule here. We just had one yesterday. So if you were here yesterday, I do appreciate you. We do have one in a couple of weeks. So on the 31st, we have our leave of absence. So we continue to improve the leave of absence. It's been a while since we talked about it, so we're going to revisit that. Perhaps you missed the first one and you want to rejoin us. Leave of absence on the 31st. I'm going to go into detail on the succession planning / 9-box grid on August 14th. So you'll be able to see that and understand how that works. It's our first presentation outside of the webinar here that you're attending, where we're going to go into the detail there. Salary grades. So many companies use salary grades or salary steps. We've never done a learning series on it. We're going to cover that at the end of August. Okay, and then moving into September, salary grades can tie into compensation management. So you'll see there, compensation management, salary grades, they're related there. So once we cover salary grades, we're going to cover compensation management again. We covered this one previously, but it just keeps getting better and better. So we're going to cover it again. So I do want to thank you all for joining us and going into overtime with us. We tend to do that with these webinars because there's so much I want to show you, and we're so proud of the work our team does. And again, I want to thank them all, and I want to thank you all for attending today's webinar, and we appreciate you. And if you do have any questions, as you can see there, reach out to us, help@criterionhcm.com. You can also do that through the administration. If you click on the help button, you'll see that email address, the phone number to reach out to us, as well as you can submit a ticket if you need to right through the help menu. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you get to enjoy R2 when it's released in a few days here. And I will see you next time, hopefully at the next Criterion Learning Series webinar. Thank you again.